Good morning, everybody. Let's get started. But let me just check if the voice and video are okay. Can anybody respond if the voice and video okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Now let's proceed from what we are doing. We were looking at the MIPS computer. We wanted to do assembly language programming on the MIPS computer because we wanted to know about its instruction set architecture. And the instruction, this is a RISC processor basically. And if we know assembly language programming of a RISC processor, we know for any other RISC processor. Maybe tomorrow you will have to do a bit of assembly programming on the ARM processor. You should be able to do without difficulty. And here we had so far looked at, there is a controller. This is the MIPS diagram, MIPS processor. We have the controller, a small part, and we have two caches actually inside the processor. One is the instruction cache. We have written here instruction memory. And the other is data cache. And see here the controller is controlling the operation of every element, including the program counter, the registers, the ALU, and so on. And there are 32 registers here that were discussed, 32 general purpose registers. There are many other registers. There are special registers like program counter, memory access register, etc., which are not shown. And there are a large number of invisible registers which we don't see. This is the view of the programmer about the processor. And first, let's look at the registers, because in all our assembly programming, we will be storing the variables in the registers. In a high level program, we just declare variables and then operate on those. Here in the assembly programming, we allocate variables to the register, remember which variable is in which register, and then based on that, we write our program. The registers here, the 32 of them, are numbered 0 to 31. And there are two ways we can write our assembly program. One is we write the register number like R0, R1, etc. Or there are names given to this register. Like there are some temporary register, there are some saved registers, stack pointer, etc., etc. So we can also write program, which is also a valid program, is we use the names of the register in our program. This is one way that we can write $0 for register 0, $1 for register 1, and $31. So this is by their number. We can also write R0, R1, R2, etc., which we will do sometimes. And sometimes we will use names of these registers. In the next slide, we'll show the names of these registers. And if you are writing a large enough program, it is preferable that you use the names of the register. That makes it more understandable. The names can be that the $16 to $23, there are 8 of them. These are called as the saved registers, or S0 to S7. These are called saved register because on a subroutine call, these values don't get disturbed. These are unaffected on a subroutine call. On the other hand, $18, so register 8 to register 15, these are called as temporary registers, T0 to T7. We'll use these names of the registers in some of our programs. In some of our programs, very small programs, we will just directly use R0, R1, etc. The temporary registers, as the name says, these hold temporary variables. The intermediate results which we don't need later on, and on a subroutine call, these are not guaranteed to be preserved. These may get disturbed because the subroutine may also make use of these temporary registers, and these may get disturbed, but the subroutine, when we'll write subroutines little later, maybe one class later. Today we'll not use subroutines. Then we'll see that while writing the subroutine, we take special care to preserve the saved registers. If we disturb them, we restore them back, but the temporary registers, we don't bother. That's the convention.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yes, please. Yes. Aman, yes, please.
Sir, register 16 to 23, if you use them in the subroutine, even if they are used in the subroutine, then it will not be changed.
No, see, we may change it in the subroutine, but then
Yes,
we have to take care to restore it back. We have to guarantee to the called routine that we have not changed. While writing the subroutine, we'll take care that the saved registers are not changed. That's the responsibility of the subroutine writer. Whereas temporary register, we are free. We need not restore back. So it will become clear when we write subroutine. So good, Aman. Anybody asking question is really appreciated. In fact, we write down the names of those who ask question. We have very positive view and give them some marks because they are asking the question, some aspects which I've overlooked, not told, etc. It becomes clear. So please ask question, everybody, just unmute and ask questions. Appreciate it. The MIPS registers, the $0, that is the register 0, register number is 0 and the name is $0. And it is constantly 0. Can't store anything here. It's hardwired to 0. You cannot change its value, can't store here anything. Then the first question that comes to mind, why do we need this register? Is it useful? But we'll see that this is one of the most used registers. We need this 0. Some register is storing 0 that has large use almost in every program. Even if it is a 3-line program, we will be using register 0. Just in another 1 or 2 slides, it will become clear that why we need $0, register 0. It's just storing 0. One, of course, that comes quickly to the mind is that if we have a variable to be initialized with 0, we just copy this to that register. One use. But then that's a small use. There are big use for this register 0, which is constant 0 always. And when there is a subroutine call, we use V0, V1, V2. Sorry, V0, V1. So these are two registers, which are register number 2, 3 for return value. While writing the subroutines, which will not do today, maybe Monday, and Monday there is a quiz coming up for 15 minutes or 14 minutes. I think it is 14 minutes. There is a quiz coming up on Monday, and the portions for that quiz is lecture number 5, 6. Lecture number 5, 6. That's for the quiz on Monday. And Monday we will write small subroutines. Today we'll just write simple programs. And when we call a subroutine, A0, A1, A2, A3, there are 4 registers. Register number 4 to 7. These are arguments to the subroutine. And T0 to T7 are 8 to 15. These are temporary values. If we use this on a subroutine call, if this get disturbed, our program should still work. The saved registers, here we have confidence that even after subroutine call, these will not get disturbed. So the values that we need after a subroutine call, we use in S0 to S7. There are more temporary registers, T8 and T9, and then there are some special registers. The global pointer, stack pointer, frame pointer, and return address. Return address, of course, is used during the subroutine call. The point at which the subroutine was called is remembered here in the register 31, so that on completion of the subroutine, it returns to that point, just after that point. And we will see the global pointer, stack pointer, and frame pointer as we proceed. Let's not discuss these. These are special registers. And we will, today's class, we will use the T's temporary registers and the saved registers. We are not going to write subroutine today. Now let's look at the instruction set.
Sir, what is the meaning of preserved by Kali?
Yeah. See, the preserved by Kali is the routine we call is called as the Kali. Okay, if we have a subroutine, and the subroutine will take care to preserve this. Because see, unlike a high-level program where we have something called as context of a variable, if you have a local variable in a C function, it is not visible to the function which is calling it. But here, unfortunately, the registers are visible to all instructions. So when we write the subroutines, we will take care, which we'll do in the next class, that we will preserve in the subroutine. The Kali is the subroutine. So the subroutine will not disturb these values. If it really wants to use these values or change these values, it will restore it back. We will do that. We will use saved register sometimes in the subroutine, but we'll restore it back. So the subroutine is preserves these registers. The others, it does not care. If it disturbs, okay, it doesn't have to restore it back. So these are preserved by the subroutine. Now let's look at the MIPS instruction set. Like all RISC processor, the memory access is done by only 2 instructions. The name of the instruction, obviously load reads a word from memory, an operand from the memory, and there are about a dozen type of load. Some take absolute addressing, some take indirect addressing, and so on, but all are some form of load. So we might write load I, load A, etc., etc. But the word load will be there. Similarly, store it stores a register into the memory. Stores some register, we'll specify the register. And it will store that register into memory. And there are several types of store, but the word store will be there. Maybe some other alphabet may get added, store I, etc. But it will store some value into the memory. Now, in a typical risk calculation, which we'll do just after a while, what we'll do is we'll first load, because the operands or the variables are there in the memory. We have only few of these we can bring to the processor registers. So we first load the operand from the memory into some register. We will perform our computations. We'll be having our algorithm. We'll translate into some ALU instructions. And finally, after all our calculations are over, we store them back to the memory for the next program to run, and the registers will get totally disturbed, and therefore before they get disturbed we store them back into the memory. That's how we write all our programs today. We load from memory, do computations, store them back in the memory. Now let's look at some examples. Add register 2 and 3 into register 1. 2 and 3, register 2 and 3 are the source operands. This is the convention in the assembly programming. The first one is the destination register. Slowly you will get used to it. As you write couple of programs, please practice writing programs. I'll give you several exercises. And in the tests later on, we'll require you to write small programs. So the convention here is that the two source registers are R2 and R3. So we add the contents of R2 and R3 and store that in register 1. Similarly, we have subtract. Register 2 minus register 3 is stored in register 1. Logical AND. Bitwise AND operation is performed on the content of register 2 and register 3 and the result stored in register 1. Very intuitive names actually. Don't have to put too much of effort to learn this. Just few hours of effort, and I hope all will be able to put that effort. Add immediate. This is a different type of add. The word add is there, but we have this alphabet appearing I. I stands for immediate. What it really means is that the last source operand here is an immediate operand. That means we add 10 to the register 2, and these are all decimal numbers. We don't use hex here in the immediate operand. These are all decimal, and register 2, the decimal value of register 2 is added 10 to that and stored in register 1. Shift left logical. So here the bits are shifted 1 bit left. Okay, sorry, 10 bit left. So shift left logical 10 bits we have specified. So whatever bits are present in register 2, all of them are shifted 10 bits to the left. Of course, similarly, we will have SLR, shift logical right. Now this is a load word.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
From where
Yes.
I am getting the immediate value?
So this is Abhinav, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Abhinav, see here, the immediate operand is typically the last source operand here. So 10 is the immediate operand here, and add immediate here it is 10. We might write 15 or 8 or whatever. So those are the immediate operands, and we know that we have to shift the words left by 8 bits. And here we add 10. So those are the immediate operands. Is it okay?
Sir, are we getting the immediate operands from the memory, or from where
No,
are we getting that?
immediate operands are part of the instruction. That is the meaning of immediate. The immediate operands are there in the program that we are writing. They are part of the instruction. This is the instruction we are writing. And the operand is present in the instruction itself. It is not there in any register or memory. It is there in the instruction. So,
Okay, sir.
okay, so the operand is there in the instruction. Let's not right now worry that what does compiler do, how does 10 come, etc. Let's not worry. Let's skip that worry to little later. Right now, let us understand this code. And that is very simple. The 10 is part of the instruction, and that's the immediate operand. Load word 100 is the memory location. This is absolute addressing. 100, memory location 100, whatever is there, put it in register 1. Load word, whatever is there in memory location 100, put in register 1. So this is absolute addressing. Store word, whatever is there in register 1, put in location 100. Load upper immediate. So here, whatever number we give immediate, so these are considered as 16-bit number. We cannot specify the immediate operand. We'll see little later it will become. It cannot be more than 16 bits because no, our instruction are all at 32 bits and 16 bits are given for this immediate operand. We cannot give more than that. And the word is 32-bit. So here we are saying this instruction is saying that store 100 in the upper words of this, in the upper bits, upper 16 bits of this word. And the lower 16 bits are set to all zeros. This has a special use, especially in memory addressing and several other use, but we'll be using such instruction, LUI, load upper immediate. There are 111 instructions, but in our programs, we'll use hardly 20, 25 or maybe max 30 instructions. We're not going to use all the instructions that are available. Only when you are developing professional programs on MIPS processor, you need all the 111 to be mastered. And here we're just having a feel of the assembly program, and we will be able to write small assembly code like searching a number from an array, sorting an array, that kind of small programs. And we will need only 25, 30 instructions. There is another instruction which we'll be using is jump. Here the immediate address, immediate operand is 100. So this is a PC relative addressing. And we jump to the location PC plus 100. We may give a negative number here also. Jump and link. Here, this is the way we call subroutines, jump and link. So here, our subroutine is stored 100 instructions down. And what this instruction does is that when we call jump and link, it not only jumps to PC plus 100 like J100, but also it saves the current PC value in register 31. Automatically, we don't have to tell anything. It just saves it. When we do jump and link, it saves it. And when we return from the subroutine, it will restore this address and set the PC value to that saved address. And here, the address to which it will jump is stored in a register. So this is the return call here. This at the end of the subroutine, we'll write this JR. So here it will, based on the address that is stored in the register, it will return, and our called program, the calling program will start executing from that point onwards. There are some conditional.
Sir, in the previous slide,
Yes.
using commands like J100 and JL100, sir, it isn't very practical, right, sir? Because how will we know exactly where our subroutine will be stored? Because oftentimes we don't know where our subroutine will be stored.
No, see, we are not really giving memory address. See, here we are giving our, as we write the code, we know that each instruction takes 4 bytes, right? One word is its instruction. And as we write the program, we'll calculate the place, assuming that all these are linearly stored in memory. The program is linearly stored in memory. If our subroutine is 10 instructions down, we'll actually calculate as we write. We'll calculate that, okay, this is 10 instruction down, and then we'll say that this is 10 words down, and then we'll write PC plus 10. Okay, something like that we'll do. Unlike the high level where you have the luxury of just calling by name, here we'll have to compute where exactly in the program it is there. Is it 10 instruction down? Is it 50 instructions up, etc.? We'll have to do it. But then we'll see that it becomes slightly simpler. We can also give a name to it. That will come later, but initially we'll do this. We'll count the number of instructions in our program and where it is, etc. That we'll have in our memory. We'll write program based on that. Any other question?
Yes, sir. If there is no subroutine at, let's say, line number 100 plus the current program
Yeah,
counter.
you will get error. See, the assembly programmers, it's not easy to write assembly program and make it run, because you will make a mistake in all computation. Later we'll see the memory computations also. See, the assembly programmers are expert in this kind of thing. As you write 10, 20, 50 programs, you become expert that where exactly the hex address at which it is stored, the decimal, where exactly in the memory the data is, where are the instructions, that you will have a mental image. In high level, life was much more relaxed. You didn't have to worry about all this stuff. But here we will worry. We will also, we will ourselves write small routines, and it will, you will see that it's not that bad actually. You can do it. So you have to remember, you have to look at your program, how many instructions down, where exactly in memory, which register, all that you will have to be careful. Now there are some conditional instructions here. Branch equal to, that means if the register, the contents of register 2 and register 1, they are equal. Register 1 and register 2 are equal, then jump to 100 instructions, sorry, 100 instructions down. Yeah. PC plus 100. So this is the if statement, skip 100 instructions. Similarly, branch not equal to. So if the contents of register 1 and register 2 are not equal, then jump 100 instructions down. So this is like if A equal to B, right? A is stored in register 1, B in register 2. If A equal to B, do something, else do something. So the if then else we'll write using BQ and BNE. Just now we'll write small programs. fortunately, many times we don't have to really remember where an instruction is there or where a subroutine is there. We don't have to really compute, like I was saying, that 50 instructions down, 35 instructions up, jump to that. We will use labels. So these are symbolic labels which we will give to instructions. And we can jump to that label. We don't have to really count how many instructions, etc. The assembler will take care to actually compute the exact address. It frees us from remembering the exact location where the program is getting stored. When you use labels, life becomes simpler because we don't make that silly mistake that instead of counting as 40, we have computed as 38, and the program gave all wrong result. That does not happen if we use labels. For example, if 250 is the location where some loop is set up, so instead of writing 250, computing and writing 250, or here instead of jump minus something, we just write jump loop. So it helps us writing more readable programs by using the labels. We can give a label to any instruction. Now let's write our first program, like hello world in C program. So this is A equal to B plus C. And since this is our simplest program, we'll assume that A, B, C have already been brought into register. From memory, A, B, C are actually will be in the memory, but here we'll assume that, okay, that we're not assuming, we are bringing from memory here. Okay, so we are first bringing from memory B into register 2 and bringing C from memory to register 3, and then doing the add 2 and 3 we are adding, and result is stored in register 4. But finally we have to store this into A. So we'll write store word register 4 into A. And A, B, C are basically memory addresses. So these are first program, simplest hello world program. Here we load the memory operands into 2 registers, do add, and then store back. If it was a CISC compute, we might have done this in one instruction. We might have write add M and then A, B, C. So B, C are added and stored in A. But this is a RISC processor. We use 4 instructions. Now let's get back to this register 0. We were saying that one use possibly was that to initialize variables. But what are the other use? Okay, this is the one where we register whatever is there in S1 into T2. There is no special move instruction here. We just add contents of S1 with 0 register, and then the value is stored in T2, which in effect moves the value in register S1 into T2. Remember that in RISC, the number of instructions are minimized. Only 111 instructions compared to 300, 400 instructions in a CISC processor. And this is one optimization we have done here. We do not have any move instruction. We use the 0 register and synthesize the move instruction from the add instruction. Similarly, if we want to move a constant value into register 3, we use this instruction. Add 0 to 3 and store in 3 R3. Otherwise, in a CISC, we might have a move immediate, move, etc. Many types of move might have been there, but here we don't have any move instruction. We just use the register 0 and the add instruction, and we have our move instruction. That is one use. One is that it helps in reducing the number of instruction. The other use of R0 is it reduces number of addressing modes. We had said that RISC not only has less instructions compared to a CISC, but also it has less number of addressing modes. Here in the MIPS processor, we have only 2 addressing mode. One is the immediate addressing, the other is displacement addressing. Okay, 3, because we of course have the register mode, register direct mode. So there are 3 addressing modes: immediate, displacement, and the register mode. All others are synthesized from the R0 register. Okay, so this is register indirect. Okay, here we don't use the register 0. We have used a offset value of 0. And we have synthesized the register indirect. What this is saying is that whatever be the content in R1, that gives us the memory address, because the offset is 0 here, which is similar to or equal to the register indirect mode which we had discussed. The register indirect mode is synthesized from the displacement mode by making the offset 0. We don't have a special register indirect mode here. We just do this manipulation, put 0 in the offset, and we have our register indirect mode. And the absolute mode, the absolute addressing, where we need to specify the memory, we use this. We use the R0 mode in the displacement, in the base register, and in the offset we have 100, so which is equivalent to the absolute mode. So we don't really write load word R1 100, even though I showed in the previous example for simplicity. But we write this because we don't have a absolute addressing mode in MIPS processor. We have minimized the number of addressing modes. We synthesize the absolute mode based on this displacement mode by using the R0 register. This is another prominent use of the R0 register. And as I was saying, there will be hardly any program we will write without using R0. We will use this register very frequently, very useful register, even though on the first glance it appears that what is this register? Always storing 0, we can't store a value there, and so on. Now let's write this program. Okay, we wrote this program actually, A equal to B plus C, and I was just mentioning here that we have to first bring BC into register and then add it and store back in register, store back the produced value into the memory. Okay, now let's write this. Please write this code. Based on what we have done so far, please write this code that we have F, G, H, I, J. These are variables, and don't worry to bring this from memory load word, and assume that these have been already brought into S0 to S4. These are already available. F, G, H, I, J are available in registers S0 to S4. Now please write this small code here. To do this computation. How do you do this? Please try for a minute. So basically, you'll have to do this G plus H. That is S1 and S2 store in a temporary register. These are saved register. Use temporary, we have temporary values coming out here, which will discard immediately after. Okay, I think some have written on the chat. Okay, very good. Archit and Shivans, very good. You have written on the chat. So G plus H, we store in the temporary register. Similarly, I and J, we add and do another addition to using those temporary values, and finally use F. So this is the code here. We first do G plus H, S1 and S2, store the result in T0, and then do I plus J, S3 and S4 store in temporary T1, and then use the temporary registers T0 minus T1 and then store in S0. Very good. I can see that many of you have actually done it and written on the chat. Very nice. Now let's go for more complex programming. Now let's look at this memory data in the memory, because they might be in various locations in the memory. We normally, if it is an array or something, or even just data, we store the address of that array in this register. And then we write the offset here. And we bring it to a temporary register, and we, let's say, add immediate with that value 100 and store it back, let's say. Store back that same result in another location in memory. Now let's try to make out this 8 and 48 in memory. How will it look like? As we have been saying that MIPS is a byte addressable computer. Whatever address we give, that specifies a byte. But here a word is 32 bits or 4 bytes. So we have to do our computation where exactly the operands are stored. If we write address 0, maybe it is storing 1001. And address 4 is a valid address. Address 3, 2, etc. These are not valid address, because we have to give the lowest of these 4 bytes. 0 is a valid address, 4 is a valid address, 8 is a valid address, and 12 is a valid address. So 4 bytes from 0, these are storing this number 1001, and 4 bytes starting at byte number 4 in the memory, these are storing 0010 and so on. So here in this program, whatever be the base address, let's say this is the base address here, and 8 is this one, 0110 will be brought here, and then added 100 to that, and then we'll store it 48 at location 48 from the base address. So 48 is 12 words away, right? So that means from here 12 words away, or it is 9 words away from here. sorry, 1, 2, sorry, 10 words away from here. So 8 to 48 are 10 words. So it will be stored 10 words away. So that kind of computation we'll have to do. And remember here that there are 2 to the power 32 memory addresses. These are byte addresses. But there are 2 to the power 30 words which we can store here. The word addresses are 0, 4, 8, 2 to the power 32. So these are valid word addresses.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, what is
Yes.
S3 doing here?
S3, where is, okay. So S3 is the base address of the array. Let's say we want to have a base address and from there we add 0, 4, 8, 12, etc. Okay, this is the displacement mode. So from a specific location in memory, we want the 4th one or 7th one or 10th one and so on. This S3 contains the specific location in memory from which we will compute. Right, so
Okay.
that's the base address. And the other one is the offset. So we'll write programs using this and then it will become clearer. But right now I am just asking this question that what is the least 2 significant bits of a word address? See, there are 2 to the power 30 words at 0, 4, 8 and 2 to the power 32 minus 4. So what will be the lowest 2 significant bits, least 2 significant bits of a word address? So like 0, 4, 8, 12, etc. What will be the least 2 significant bits of these addresses? Yes, anybody like to answer?
Zeros.
Who answered? Name, please.
Vikram.
Okay, Vikram, very good. So the lowest 2 bits of a word address is 0, 0. Just think about it, that the lowest 2 bits, Vikram has got it right, that the least 2 significant bits of any word address is 2 zeros. And that is the important observation which we'll use in our programming. And to be able to understand the programs and even the hardware, we need this important thing, that for every word address, the least significant bits, the 2 least significant bits are 0 and 0. Now let's look at how these words are stored in different computers. That is called as the byte ordering. If we look at all the machines manufactured by various vendors, there is HP, IBM, Intel, etc., etc. So there are 2 ways in which words can be stored in memory. One is called as big endian and the other is called as little endian. In the big endian convention, because these are taking 4 bytes, the least significant byte has the highest address. We said that the word address is stored from 0, 4, 8, etc. And here in big endian, the least significant byte has the highest address. And in little endian, the least significant byte has the lowest address. Let's look at an example. Let's consider this example, hex example. This is a 4-byte and there are 8 4-bits there. And each 4-bit consists of a hex that we write as 0x is the hex. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now each 2 of these become a byte. So 6, 7, 4, 5, etc. will get stored. In a big endian, 6, 7 will be stored in the highest address. 67 is the lowest byte, the least significant byte. These are stored in the highest address. So that is the big endian, least significant byte at the highest. In the little endian, the least significant byte at the lowest address. And then they are laid out subsequently. And a word address is typically the lowest byte here in the address. So in the lowest byte or the word address exactly, the least significant bit is stored for the little endian, and the most significant byte is stored in the big endian. I think that's how they call it, as little endian and big endian. Let me repeat here that a word address is given by the lowest byte it occupies, and from there it occupies 4 bytes. In a little endian, the least significant bits are put in the word address exactly, the lowest address, and then these are laid out subsequently. In the big endian, in the word address or the lowest address, the highest byte goes in. That's how it is called as big endian. Now let's do this small exercise based on our understanding. Now let's say these are the byte addresses. A word is stored in 4 consecutive bytes starting from the byte address 1000, 1001, 1002, 1003. And the word address will be specified as 1000. Now let's try to store this number FF00AA11. This is the hex number. So how will it be stored in little endian? So what will be stored in 1000? Will it be FF or 11?
1
1
Okay. Good. So the least significant goes to the word address 1000, and subsequently they are laid down here. In the big endian, the most significant bytes go to the word address. That's the big endian. The big end of the word comes to the word address, and then subsequently they are laid down. Now let's do this example program today, that we want to add variable h with an array A8. And we want to store that in G. And G is in register S1, H is in register S2, and the base address of A, array A, is in S3. Now, how do we write this program? That base address of the array we store in a register S3, and we want to add A8 with H, and then we store the result in G. So we need to do a bit of calculation. We know that it's the 8th element, and there are each element takes 4 bytes, so 32. 8th element will be laid at location 32. And then we write this code here. Load word 32 S3 into T0, and then add that to H. So we are at the end of the class today. We'll stop here. Based on what we learned today, next class we will write larger programs with simple algorithms, 10, 20, 30 line programs. And Please brush up the basic instructions of MIPS, the 2030 instructions that we are using. And just reminding that on Monday, we'll have a 14-minute quiz coming up. The portions for that is lecture number 5 and 6. Any quick question or we stop here?
So why we use Little Indian and Big Indian? Can't we use only the Little Indian?
Good question, Mohsin. Very good question. See, unfortunately, the vendors, they want their system to be incompatible with other vendors. Even though there are standard organizations who want that everything should be compatible. Everybody should use either Big Indian or Little Indian. But the vendors don't want that. They want that somebody using their system will be stuck with their system. He cannot buy any other system. So the different vendors, from the beginning, they have been using Big Indian and Little Indian. And now the standardization efforts are not successful because they are saying we are already using Big Indian or Little Indian, we cannot change and so on. So Mohsin, it would have been very nice if everybody used one convention. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Some of the vendors use Little Indian and some of the vendors use Big Indian. Okay, we'll discuss more about this. We'll stop here. Please bring the questions next class, or at the end of this class. Thank you very much.